You guys, I'll tell you what, just finished recording Stash My Life in Hiding, where I interviewed Laura Cathcart Robbins. That was fun. Elise Bryson and I did. And so I'm kind of reversing the order of things. Usually, like, I get my guest on and then I read their bio and all of that. But I wanted to just come on afterward and pretend like I'm giving the bio first, which, well, not pretend, but just do things a little bit out of order, because I wanted to take our whole time and just talk to Laura. And I knew that Elise and I both talk so much that we would need that time, and we certainly did. And so, man, I'm just like glowing. I have like afterglow from this whole thing. It just was incredible. It was amazing. And Laura is doing incredible work. So you're in for a super amazing treat with this episode. I'm excited for you to hear it. All right. So let me tell you a little bit about her that I did not share when I just launched into, my big verbose chit chat and fangirl diatribe. Is that a word? Monologue, I guess I should say. Okay, here's her bio. Doo-doo-doo-doo. All right. Laura Cathcart Robbins is the best-selling author of the Atria Simon & Schuster memoir, Stash My Life in Hiding. And if you're watching, it looks like this. And I love this cover. Nay, I'm tickled pink by this cover. Get it? Okay. And she's also the host of the popular podcast, The Only One in the Room. And I know that you can find this on Apple Podcasts because that's where I subscribe to it. She has been active for many years as a speaker and a school trustee, and is credited for creating the Buckley School's nationally recognized Committee on Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion and Justice. Her recent articles on the subject of race, recovery, and divorce have garnered her worldwide acclaim. She is a 2022 TEDx speaker and an LA Moth Story Slam winner. Currently, she sits on the advisory boards of the San Diego Writers Festival and the Outliers Headquarters Podcast Festival. Find out more about her on her website, or you can look for her on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and you can follow her on Twitter or X. All right, please enjoy. She is one of a kind and just as down to earth as they come, but also as special and unique as they come. And that's a hard combo to find sometimes. So it is with pleasure that I introduce her. And please enjoy Laura Cathcart Robbins.
Why am I the addict? Why are they all fine?
Mm-hmm.
Why am I the one who has to go through all this?
Mm-hmm.
And completely steeped in self-pity, self-righteous self-pity, which I think is the worst kind. It's usually the kind I have. The work that I did in recovery edged that down, evaporated it little by little, allowed me to see myself more realistically, which I didn't want to at first. But once I did, I understood more about myself. And then I was able to forgive and have compassion for myself. And I really think that was the key.
Welcome to Amy Liz Harrison's podcast, Eternally Amy, a mum of eight's journey from jail to joy, a Gen Xer who overcame her struggle with alcohol to become a best-selling author and mental health advocate. She shares stories of hope and offers ideas for others struggling with mental health challenges. One thing is for sure, you'll leave with something to chew on. And now, here's your host, Amy Liz Harrison.
Well, greetings, compadres. So, as you know, some days I get to interview complete strangers. It's always fun and interesting, but I've been looking forward to today because I feel like I know today's guest way, way more than I do. But I have been like fangirling for a fair few months. And so when I found out she was coming on my podcast, I don't know what to tell you. It was like I thought it was Christmas Eve for the entire time up until today. And so I'm like beside myself. I'm trying to calm down and I'm trying to act normal. So that being said, a couple months ago, we read a book in the Boozeless Book Club, and it was called Stash, My Life in Hiding. I hope that you can see that. Okay. And it is by Laura Cathcart Robbins, who I don't know. I read this book like I could not put it down. And I'm here to tell you that this is how it went. There's a restaurant in New York City. It's called Serendipity, and it's got kind of an 80s vibe. So that's on brand with me. And they have a drink called the frozen hot chocolate. And you take one sip of that thing and you just can't get enough. It's chocolatey goodness, delicious, velvety. And that kind of experience in drinking that frozen hot chocolate is what I had reading Stash. I could not put it down. It was as if I was back in my drinking days, drinking a lukewarm bottle of cheap Chardonnay from the Chevron or something like that. I just could not get enough of it. And so I am so honored. I'm so thrilled to have Laura here with us today. And bonus, I have my friend, Elise Bryson, who is also the Sober Curator, the founder of Sober Curator, which, you know, I also write for. And the two of us, I'm going to just speak for you, Elise. We are fangirling together. We're just so thrilled to be here. And Laura, we're beyond blessed to have you here today. So thank you for coming.
Oh my goodness. First of all, to even be in the same sentence with the frozen hot chocolate at Serendipity. I love that so much. It was one of the first things I tried when I first went to New York when I was a kid. And it is, mandatory for every single trip. I have to go get that. I'm not sure if I can anymore because I'm plant-based now. So I might have to break my vegan sobriety though for certain things.
I mean,
grab one of those. Yes. But thank you for all those kind words and for bringing me on the show. I'm so happy because I got to meet both of you, as we're taping this just a couple of days ago for the first time in real life. And it was such a treat because I didn't know either of you were going to be there. I was in a different city. You both were there. And it was just like, oh, it's you. And it's you. And it was the gift that kept on giving, meeting both of you.
Oh, well, I love that. Thank you so much. It was such a treat. And I just, I now have a signed autographed copy of Stash. So not to brag, but if you're listening, just letting you know, I have one.
And it's not bragging if it's true. It's not bragging.
Right? It's the truth. So whatever. Okay. So Laura, just to kick it off, Elise asked a question the other night at that event, at that gathering, that was a seemingly simple question, but we talked about it all the way home. And we were pretty enthralled with where your answer sort of took us. And so we were just wondering, how did you come up with the title for Stash, My Life in Hiding?
Thank you for bringing that up. I'm really curious as to what enthralled you about it, but you'll tell me after I answer it. And I think we just talked about Stash, the Stash part. We didn't really talk about the subtitle, which is My Life in Hiding, and that was a whole nother process. But the way this book, Stash, My Life in Hiding, had I say like 15 other titles. It probably wasn't that many. It was probably like 8 or 9 other titles, but it felt like every time I went to look it up in my computer, I would look up the wrong name and be like, what was I calling it last week? There it is. And one of the titles that came to me, there were actually 2 titles. I don't know if I talked about this one. The first one that I thought about, which actually wouldn't have been a good fit for this book, was the opposite of engaged, because there's no word for that, right? When you're in that period where you're waiting to get divorced, where you filed and you're waiting for it to be final. And I thought that would be a great title for my book. I still think it's a great title, but it wouldn't have been a good title for Stash because it wouldn't have given you the sense of what it's really about. And the second title, which I fastened onto, and there were probably other titles in between those two, was there's a quote that I love that's told by a friend of mine who, she might be a writer. She's not an author, but she's just one of those people who speaks and I hang on every word. Every sentence is like spoken word. It's like poetry. And she says, faith isn't jumping from point A to point B. Faith is just jumping from A. And this year that I write about in Stash My Life in Hiding, the year of 2008, I had filed for divorce. I was, swirling toward the bottom of an addiction, and I didn't know what my future looked like at all. I had an idea of what it might look like if I continued on in my addiction the way that I was. I had an idea that I would either end up dead or in jail or in an institution. But I didn't know what my life would look like if I was out of my marriage. And that was terrifying for me. And I am someone who really likes to know exactly what's going to happen when I let go of something. If I let go of this, I'm going to get this, and this is what it's going to look like. And then I think the story I've told myself is that once I know what that looks like, then I can begin to deal with it, even if I don't like it. But I can prepare myself properly for it. But if I don't know, it spins me out, So to hear this woman say faith isn't jumping from A to B, faith is just jumping from A, the release and relief that it gave me, and the possibility, right, of this is not up to me what happens, that illusion of control. I think I'm home, my kids are in their beds, the alarm is set, everybody's safe. Nobody's safe. Nobody's safe. There's an illusion that people are safe then, but anything could happen. The house could burn down, someone could break in, there could be, any number of things could happen. But that illusion of control is very comforting to me. I believe it when I feel like that. I believe that I'm safe. And so to leave that safety is it's a challenge for me. And her words over the years have given me the ability to let go of lots of things, to jump from A and not know what B is, just to take that leap. And so that was really profound for me. So I wanted to call it Faith Isn't Jumping from A to B, Faith is Just Jumping from A. The consensus was that was too long. And then I said, let's just call it Jumping from A. And they're like, no, no one's going to know what that means. And I'm like, okay, but then they could read it and then they could see, and they're like, no. We need them to not think about the title. We want them to see the title, know what the book is about, and pick it up. And I really struggled with titles after that. And I was, writing, and we finally got to first pass, which is when the manuscript is done, the editor has approved it, and it needs to go to copy editing, after which you can't make too many changes. And we were at that point, or we're at that point. We were coming up to that point. And we had a working title that nobody really liked. I don't even remember what it was. But I do have a legal pad. This is my life is on these pads. I have 50 or 60 of them in a drawer, and I don't throw them away because I literally write down everything that I need to do on these pads, and I doodle on them when I'm on the phone, and I schedule things on them. So I was talking to somebody and doodling. Oh, you have yours. Good.
Got it.
And At first I set aside a day aside to not write, to not do anything, and try to come up with this title. And I came up with nothing. I came up dry at the end of the day, and quite frankly, frustrated, because it's my title. I felt like it should have been accessible to me, like, why aren't you coming to me after all this writing, after all this time, after the book is sold, the book is about to come out, and I don't have a title. And I was talking to someone the following day, and I was doodling with my right hand while I was listening to them. And I wrote down stash because they were talking about the stashes, not these stashes. They were talking about stashing something in their house. And I was like, stash. And I was like, stash. I got to go. I'll call you back.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah.
And stash. And then the feeling, the reason that it worked so well for me is because I had an emotionally abusive stepfather who came into my life at age 5. And in order not to rub him the wrong way, I had to stash away pieces of myself. And I literally, as the good drug addict that I was, I had stashes all over my house at the end, or all over my closet, to be more specific. But my closet was pretty massive, so there were lots of hiding places. And so stash, it hit me. It was a light bulb moment. I called my agent. She got really giddy with excitement. She loved it. We called my editor, also loved it, ran it by the team at Simon & Schuster, got all systems go, and we had the title, but not the subtitle. So I don't know if you want to hear about the subtitle. It's not as interesting a story, but
Yeah, I think I would love to, if you don't mind.
yeah. I mean, I wanted to call it Stash, the Year I Ran Out of Hiding Places. And meaning I literally ran out of hiding places for my drugs and booze, but I also couldn't hide anymore. So the way that it works is there's this very intimate relationship between my editor and I at Atria Simon & Schuster. From her, she has to send everything to teams, sales teams, marketing teams, the publishing team, to get okays. So it's a lot different than the work she and I did, which was kind of intense and intimate and vulnerable. There's a trust factor there. But I don't know these people in sales or marketing. I met them. They all seemed really nice, but I didn't have a relationship with them. But she had to send that to them, and they vetoed it. They didn't like it. They had a lot of reasons why they didn't think it was a good subtitle for the book. I did not agree with any of their reasons, but there wasn't much I could do. They weren't going with it. They didn't think they could sell it. So I was asked to go back to the drawing board. And I mean, honestly, this process lasted for months. We went back and forth with different iterations. They came back with things like Hollywood Louboutins and something. I'm like, no, makes me sound like one of the Real Housewives. Like,
Yeah.
That's not what it is. And so we kind of danced around for a while. This is where, I mean, there were so many places where I was incredibly grateful for my agent, but this was one of the times where I was really grateful that she's a lioness. Like, she'd take my temperature. Do you love it? I don't love it. Then I'm going to bat. And she would go back in and say, no, that's not going to happen. We need other options, blah, blah, blah. And we finally, after dancing around for all that time, came up with My Life in Hiding as kind of, it's like where there's a word, I can't think of it, where we both sides benefited from it, a compromise.
Yeah.
A compromise. It was a compromise between The Year I Ran Out of Hiding Places and what they wanted. So My Life in Hiding, I liked it. We tried it with different fonts, see how it looked under the title, and we thought it looked really good. So that's where we went.
Thank you so much. That's exactly what Elise and I were talking about on the way home, was this whole concept of, and you just said it again right now when you were talking about the title, was stashing pieces of yourself away in a protective kind of a manner. And I think for me, after you said that, I just was struck with this, like, Quit Lit is generally thought of, right, as addiction of various kinds. And maybe not everybody loves it because maybe it's too sensitive, too close to home, whatever. But the hiding piece, I feel like, at least for me, I mean, when I get honest, it's like, oh yeah, I'm hiding stuff everywhere. Like I'm hiding parts of who I am and my vulnerabilities and my insecurities. I'm always hiding those outside of like close friendships and my family and like 12-step rooms. But outside of that, I don't know who's safe. And, we've got this like persona where you sort of take the temperature of a room and just kind of go, yeah, no, I'm not gonna, I'm only gonna go so far in this room because I'm just not sure they can handle my kind of in your face, like, oh yeah, that's because I wanted to be liked and I was coming from a place of fear or something like that. So I loved that picture that you drew in that story of, yeah, not only was I stashing these pills, but my whole life I was stashing pieces of myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was it for me, that was the aha when you said that, because I had taken it very literal with the stashing of the pills, not in your closet. I very much remember the tampon part of the treatment. I love that part of the book. I love that part of the book. I'm not going to say anything more because I really don't like giving away juicy tidbits of books, but I had taken it so literal. And then when you said it, the double entendre of the stashing and hiding things, it just like, it smacked me in the face. And we talked about it and there was traffic and construction. So we talked about it for like 45 minutes that night afterwards, because I was like, and the parallels of, we end up stashing the pills or the booze or the whatever because of all of the stashing of the truth and the hiding, sometimes in plain sight, right? Which goes really nicely with your only one in the room. You can be the only one in the room and all the things that means, and still be hiding in plain sight and stashing things in plain sight. And so I just loved that you peel back the depth of your title, and I got to have an entirely new experience with it. And that's, I think, the genius of what this book is that it reads like a fabulous novel that I want to see on the silver screen, and it pulls you in, and I didn't want to put it down. And then I keep having experiences with your story. And now I sound super fangirly, but like, I think it's a really big deal for women in long-term recovery to speak their truth, because as another woman in long-term recovery, there's not a lot of us, right? Because long-term recovery is hard, full stop, it's hard. And then the fact that you're doing such a phenomenal service to providing a story for a whole section of the recovery population that has not been represented well.
Yes.
And as a woman who does a lot of service work with women in my day-to-day life and does the best that I can with what I have in my own experiences, I am so thrilled to see you occupying the space, because that means you've broken through the ceiling and now more will follow, right? And so I just think the work that you're doing and the way that it was done, it's just, there's so much juiciness to it.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Phenomenal.
Elise, so much. Thank you for that. And I just wanted to thank you separately for all the support that you've given to me and to Stash. You've been so vocal, I mean, on social media about supporting this book, and I really appreciate it. What was I going to say? You said, so you kind of took the wind out of me because I was about to say something and then I was just so like overcome. But you were saying about women of color and long-term sobriety. I buy medallions for people, sobriety medallions, as they celebrate milestones in sobriety. And like the first 10 years, like I kind of came in with a group of us. So for the first 10 years, I would buy medallions just, because they're expensive, buy them for my close friends. And there were so many to choose from. And now we're over 10, sometimes 20, sometimes 30. I'm 15. And there are so few to choose from because not that many people stay sober that long. They just don't manufacture them.
They literally don't make them.
Yeah, they literally don't make them. And so it is rare air to be in long-term recovery, period, and then to be female and in long-term recovery, or for people who identify that way, is even rarer. And then you distill it even further to being not just a woman of color, but being a Black woman in recovery, and and identify as both. But I think it is particularly helpful, and thank you for pointing that out, for Black women to see that not only is this done, people in our culture do get sober. We do admit that there's a problem that we can't handle by ourselves. And we treat that problem however one treats it. I treat it through 12-step recovery, but it's recovery. However it goes, it's recovery. And recovery is available for us. But people don't know that unless they see it. Like, I didn't know that Black people could be actors on TV and be beautiful until Diane Carroll was Julia in the 1970s. Everybody I had seen was, not in a glamorous role that looked like me. If they were in the show at all, they were either a domestic or a prostitute. And then Julia, for people who don't know, Diane Carroll was gorgeous, and she was this long-legged Black nurse. And this was the first professional role, glamorous role I had ever seen. If you don't see that, you don't know it's possible. And so I really appreciate you pointing out that Stash is many things, but hopefully it is a way to pave the way for other people to see what's possible and come into recovery.
Absolutely. And the other thing that's coming up for me that I remember from our night together a couple of nights ago, there was another woman in the group that asked the question about, I'm going to paraphrase because I don't remember exactly how she worded it, but it was, are you mad at your doctor or the doctors for not giving you good instructions, or like it's their fault that you ended up with this problem? That was what she was insinuating. She did not say it that way, but I'm paraphrasing. And in your answer, I said this to Amy on the way home. Back me up, Amy. I said she spoke from a place of a recovered woman.
Yeah.
Because your answer was no, because I wasn't telling them the truth. And you kept it to your side of the street instead of placing blame on anybody in your outer circle. You owned it and said, no, my part was this. And that strength, like, that just doesn't happen overnight. That comes, we know that comes from a lot of deep work. And so I just, again, another layer that I knew was in the book, but then I was like, I knew it, so yeah, I just, fangirling a little bit over here. Don't mind me.
Definitely a sign of a healthy woman in recovery. I mean, we were just blown away. It's so true. And, I kept thinking too about all of those things that you mentioned that were behaviors that I totally did in the midst of my alcoholism or alcohol use disorder, whatever you want to call it, was the labeling of the bottles, all the things that people can relate to who have been there, right? Making the Post-it notes and pretending like I was Columbo or Jessica Fletcher the next day, trying to figure out, what did I say? What did I do? All of that. But the pain of the actual having to hide things away, having to hide my vulnerabilities and not really knowing at that time what those really were, and having to hide what was really going on with me with my friend group. I tried to, put on a sort of a face of presenting well. All of that stuff I related to so closely in the book. And I think at a soul level, what really struck me, if I can read just a little portion. So this is page 18 from Stash. If hiding in plain sight were an Olympic sport, I would be a gold medalist. There was a certain peace that stole over me once everyone was fooled and my secrets were safely tucked away. Only then did I feel secure, knowing I alone had control of the narrative. But then one morning in March, one of the many notes my counselor had been sending home, which up until then I had been successfully intercepting, slipped through with the day's mail. And just like that, it was over. So to just paraphrase a little bit, Laura's talking about when she was in high school at this point and skipping class. And so then a little further down, it says, I had told all my friends that the reason they didn't see me in any of their classes was because I was taking all honors. And no one ever questioned it because why would they? I was smart, put together, and going with the star running back. But now it was all crashing down around me. Some of my teachers didn't even know I existed. Others had a vague recollection of a shy Black girl who sat in the back. My friends would all be shocked. My football player boyfriend was going to be majorly confused. This is a nightmare. So I sat there with my arms folded, staring ahead blankly while they all spoke. The counselor proposed a strategy to help me catch up, a plan that included remedial classes in summer school and ended with me graduating a year after my classmates. But taking this deal meant admitting to everyone that I'd been lying and that I was too dumb to make it without special help. No thanks. Give them nothing. And that gives me total shivers, because the give them nothing, which I know stemmed from some other childhood stuff as well. What a coping mechanism, right? That is almost becomes something that maybe was adopted at one point, but then just becomes a lifestyle, right? Just becomes like nope, give them nothing, like a protective suit, probably to zip yourself up in. But that just really moved me every time you said that phrase in the book. And I was wondering if you might mind speaking to, those lunches with your friends and how you bridged that gap from going from, I'm not going to let them in on this addiction, I'm not going to let them know anything's happening, to getting honest with them.
Yeah, that was really weird to hear you read that. It was really strange. I haven't heard too many people read my words back to me.
Oh.
I was interested in hearing how it ended. Like it didn't happen to me. It's weird. Give them nothing was survival for me in my childhood. It was essential. It is how I survived my childhood. I believed that as a teenager, I needed it as well in order to survive. I don't know if that's true, but I know that as a child, it was true. I did not need it as a young adult and an adult, but I still believed that I did. And it wasn't until after I got sober and started looking at these behaviors and that, as we say in 12-step recovery, the causes and conditions, that I understood that these were coping mechanisms or survival skills that I had developed. And my choice was, do I still need this? Is it still serving me? Mm-hmm. Some of them were, some of them are, and some of them aren't. And I think that these tools that I developed as a child become weapons when they no longer serve me. To keep others at bay, to keep me safe. I'm putting that in air quotes. And they're not good for my recovery when they're weapons. So, it actually it goes back, Elise, to what you were talking about with my doctor. That was a give him nothing too. It looked different.
Yeah.
Right. But I didn't want to give my doctor anything that would make him judge me, doubt me, or think less of me. And including being diagnosed with postpartum depression. Like I floated it because I told myself I would, but once he asked me the questions and said no, I was like, oh, good. Thank God. Thank God I don't have that. I don't want to have that because, I didn't think this, but the process was somewhere in me that I wanted to be held in certain esteem by him. I wanted to be regarded a certain way. So the give them nothing has been, the working fabric of my life. And the lunch that I write about with my friends, my Sex and the City girls in the book, was actually 3 different lunches. I didn't see them all together, and there were 2 of them that I saw twice in this. And so it was like me and my best friend Shelly. That was the first lunch. And then anyway, it doesn't matter. But so I wrote about it as one because it would have taken too long to write about all the lunches. So I wrote about it as one. And, I was freaked out. I had removed myself from my best friends, these women who cared about me. We had been each other's bridesmaids. We were godmothers to each other's children. Our husbands were all best friends. Like, it was tight. And I was the first one out. I was the first one to file for divorce. I was the first one. I'm the only one who's dealt with addiction out of all of them. And I didn't want to be that. I wanted to be like everybody else. I don't want that spotlight. And so I had just quietly pulled myself away from them as I kind of circled the drain with my addiction, and stopped returning phone calls, stopped making lunch appointments, stopped showing up for whatever it was that I had, where I had to be social with them, because it was too difficult. And I think everyone except for Shelly found out that I went to treatment after I was in treatment. And the other ones had no idea that I needed to go to treatment. So they felt doubly betrayed. They just didn't even know that anything was wrong besides the fact that I was getting divorced, which was very convenient for me. I don't recommend getting sober and divorced at the same time. But if you're trying to hide an addiction, getting a divorce is a convenient excuse for why you're sad, or why you're not social, or because people bought it. They bought that,
Sure.
Going through this divorce. So my friends had no idea there was this addiction. They didn't see me drink. I didn't drink that much anyway. And when I did anything, it was usually after my kids went to sleep and before I left the house in the morning. So meeting them was terrifying. Meeting them, I had to coach myself every step that I took. Literally, like, move your right foot, move your left foot, get over to the table. Like, literally every step. Pick up the fork, pick up the menu. Don't order what you normally order, which is a lemon ball or a vodka, whatever. You have to get something that sober people drink. And yeah, you might be embarrassed if the waiter clocks it as like, oh, that's code for sober, but too bad. You have to order it. Never more did I feel like I needed a drink at a social engagement than I did that first lunch with my.
Sure.
I could have really used a drink to tell her why I wasn't drinking anymore.
Right?
Yeah. So, going from give my friends nothing.
Yeah.
I did. And not at them, really at myself at that point, to tell them everything, give them everything, was incredibly painful for me. I didn't sit there and feel like, oh, I'm so glad that's over afterwards. I was still tense with pain. I was still racked with it. I was ashamed. I felt guilty. I was resentful, not at them, but just at the whole situation. Why am I the addict? Why are they all fine? Why am I the one who has to go through all this? And completely steeped in self-pity, self-righteous self-pity, which I think is the worst kind. It's usually the kind I have. The work that I did in recovery edged that down, evaporated it little by little, allowed me to see myself more realistically, which I didn't want to at first. But once I did, I understood more about myself. And then I was able to forgive and have compassion for myself. And I really think that was the key.
That's beautiful. Yeah. And, I have to say, the other thing that I loved that you did so brilliantly in Stash was you did not paint a rosy picture of early sobriety. And I love when people are honest about that. And you did that so brilliantly. You were so descriptive with your feelings and emotions. And so thank you for that. Because I think, too often you sort of have this kind of fairy tale sort of idea of quit lit that like, oh, and then they're going to get clean and sober and then everything is great, and it's like, okay, nope, it was rocky and I didn't feel great. And, there were still messes I had to clean up, and I just appreciated that. So thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard it said that alcohol is a solution for alcoholism,
Mm.
right? This is why people drink, because there's this alcoholism, this restless, irritable, discontentedness, this loneliness.
Yes.
And so alcohol helps. It helps people be convivial. It helps people to, be social, to be friendly, to feel good in their own skin. It's the solution for that condition. But once you take the alcohol away, because you have to, no less,
Mm-hmm.
then you're still left with this condition. And mine was magnified. Mine was like on fleek. I was vibrating with all those things. It wasn't like up and down. It was every single thing that made me uncomfortable was at full tilt. And I had nothing to treat it with anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing.
Mm-hmm.
It was horrendous.
Mm-hmm.
It was, this whole year of 2008, I'm in my addiction for the first few months, but then I'm sober. And I'm in as much pain as I was when I was using. I will say that getting sober was the hardest thing I ever did. Staying sober for me is not. Staying sober is really, I'm so grateful for it. I feel like it's a gift. I also feel like it's a gift that I'm not looking for a back door on this. I know that I'm an alcoholic. I have addiction. And I have a solution for it, which is that 12-step program that I talked about. And that can make my shoulders go down. It's like, I don't have to wonder why I'm like this anymore. This is it. This is my diagnosis. And my prognosis is good as long as I take this treatment. And the treatment doesn't involve any substances for me. And that's just the way I do my recovery. But it was really painful. It was a really painful first year for me. I really didn't start feeling better until well into the second year on a consistent basis. Obviously, I had flashes. I had amazing moments with my kids in there where I realized that I was there and I was present for them. And that is so grateful for those moments. And I knew it would have been different had I still been using, but those went away and I was back to the day-to-day, and the day-to-day would hurt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think this picture gets portrayed of you get sober, you leave treatment, and everything is like rainbows and unicorns and pink clouds. And maybe it is for people. Maybe it is. It was not my experience. It was not your experience. And I know it wasn't Amy's experience either. Right. And so I really love the rawness and the honesty of like, you're basically writing about leaving treatment and headed straight to the pharmacy.
Yeah.
And you're like, as if this, and you're justifying it. You're like, and this is why it makes sense.
Yep.
And this is how I'm going to get home. And it's just like, yeah, I totally get that.
Yeah.
Yep. And the fear of the like, well, wait a minute, I can't get my just in case, stash. And I remember even saying things to people that would sort of reserve my dance card for drinking, kind of, if you will, just in case I needed it, and so definitely related to that as well.
Yeah. I mean, Scott, my boyfriend, who I met in treatment, which is in the book, but he always said when his parents died that would be his get out of jail free card, that he would be able to have a drink when his parents died. And his dad died when he was 9 months sober suddenly. And he didn't drink. And he was stunned by that. And then his mom died a few years ago, where he's where we have the same amount of sobriety, and he didn't drink through that. But he was really like, he thought he had given himself permission to do so. And then when he came up against it, he realized that wasn't the way he wanted to go through it. He didn't want to go through his dad's death drunk. He didn't want to go through his mother's death drunk. He wanted to be present, even as painful as it was.
Yeah, when I was telling Amy when we were picking out your book for her book club, I was like, it's a lot of things. It's even a little bit of a romance. I love a rehab romance.
It is also, I think there are three love stories. There's the love story with me and Ambien, because I loved it. I loved it.
Yeah.
I loved it. Like every the way it tasted, the way it looked, the way it felt, like getting them, like I loved it. The through line love story is the story with my children. Like it's a love story between a mother and her children. And then it's a budding love story, a new romance story with Scott and I. And no idea. It was a terrible idea. It was a terrible idea.
Oh, I was like, oh, this is not going to end well.
No,
And then when I found out that you're still together, I was like, oh.
It was a terrible idea. And I'll tell you just really quickly, we were not a rehab hookup.
No, yeah, that was clear.
We're not a rehab, and then we waited for quite a while. We dated for a number of years. We moved in together 6 years later. He didn't meet my kids for a year and change. Like, we really were patient with it. Once we were like, what are we doing? If we're really doing this, this is what we're going to do. We're going to have our batting order, which was our recoveries first, our respective families, his 2 girls, my 2 boys second, and then everything else, including each other, was third. And we really kept that order. So that I didn't mistakenly put him above my recovery or above my children. My children's needs absolutely always came before his. And my recovery came before my children's needs.
I love that intentionality around it, and that tracks with who I know you are based off of the words I've written that you've wrote. And I think there's actually a 4th love story here. And I think it's the one of you falling in love with yourself.
I love that. I love that. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Discovering this girl who had to protect herself the way that she, and like I said earlier, seeing her clearly, and then forgiving, and then having compassion. And then, yes, you're absolutely right, falling in love, in a way that people say you can't get sober for your kids, I absolutely 100% did. But I stay sober now for myself. And there's a big difference for me. But I did not go to rehab or get sober at all for anybody else but them. I would never have gone.
But that's what got you there. And it's like, so who cares? I've even had gals that I've worked with over the years that are like, I want to go to this meeting because there's a cute boy in the meeting that I like. Is that okay? I'm like, I don't care what gets you there. I really don't. Like, whatever motivates you, sister, just get in the room,
Yeah.
So I think that, I mean, it's a divine intervention that you had kids to get sober for. Like, they say, in a sense, like, I always, as a single mom, I got sober for my child. And, but I wouldn't have if I didn't have him. I wouldn't have had a reason to. But I knew that I had to stay alive for him. And towards the end there, that was getting a little questionable. Right. And so, because it's like, I was like, well, my parents, they're strong. They'll be able to handle it if I'm gone. My sister, she's a therapist. She'll do work around it. She'll be fine. But my son will not survive. He will not survive if he loses his mom, because I'm his entire world, because it's just been the 2 of us the whole time. And so that was enough reason for me to figure it out and keep figuring it out.
And I love that, because my experience was just a little bit different, which was the first time I went to rehab, I was trying to get sober because everybody wanted me to, for my kids, for my husband, and that didn't work. Immediately went to the airport and relapsed. And so after getting out of jail, then going back, it was like, yeah, this isn't the life that I want for myself. And I didn't really believe I was worth it. But, as the old saying goes, right, start to act my way into new thinking. And that did work for me. And now of course, it's the best thing that ever happened to me. And P.S., I'm lazy and I like the easier, softer way. And it is much easier and softer to stay sober for me. And so I love that you said that, Laura, too, was like, yeah, getting sober, so hard. Staying sober, so much easier.
Amy, you have 8 children. You are anything but lazy. Okay.
Well,
She has 8 children. And Laura, there are no twins in there. There are no twins. I always say that to people because I'm like, she put in the time for all 8. There was no doubling up.
that is true. Thank you.
What are their ages?
My oldest is 22. The youngest is about to turn 6. So I had 4 and we were done. And then, got sober, got actually hit rock bottom after that, got sober, and then ended up having 4 more. So it's kind of a split story, but also cohesive, strangely. So yeah.
Well, and I love, so in Amy's book, Eternally Expecting, and I don't know if you've seen it, Laura, but her cover, it's a martini glass and the stir stick is a pregnancy test. Like it is brilliant. You know how I feel about a good cover. We've already covered this with yours. I love a good cover. I love it.
Love it.
But Amy foreshadowed as a child, she had 8 Cabbage Patch Kids. So she just law of attraction that right into existence.
That's scary. That's really
isn't that wild? It's wild.
Well, I'm shocked. I'm like, wow. I don't know anybody that has 8 kids that they gave birth to.
Oh, okay. Yep. Now you do.
Yeah. I know people who have like blended family, 8 kids, 4 kids,
right.
If you adopted, but no, that's amazing.
Turns out 8 is enough, right?
8 is enough. There it is.
Aren't they lucky, Amy, to have you?
Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, okay, so here's the thing I have to hear about, though. We have to hear about, if you don't mind sharing however much you're comfortable with, your new project that you're working on.
Yeah, so I'm working on a book that it's a novel, but it's autofiction, which is not an actual category apparently, but people use the term. But if you look up autofiction, you're not going to find it at Amazon or Barnes and Noble, but it's autobiographical fiction. And it's usually written by people who want to write about big events in their lives, but they don't want to hurt anybody or hurt the people involved. So they fictionalize the big event, and that way they can, protect as much as they can within the confines of this, whatever the constraint is. And so I'm writing about a betrayal that happened that was incredibly painful for me, that took a long time for me to get to neutral on in sobriety, longer than anything, actually. And I had a lot of things that had come up that I wanted to get there and got there faster. This one took a long time. But I am at neutral with it now. So I can write it from that position of neutrality, which is really important for me. It's the place where I was when I wrote Stash, where I didn't blame anyone else for what happened. I was able to just write my story. And that's where I want it to get with this, where I can just write my story in a different way. I think it'll also be helpful for people who have similar betrayals in their lives and maybe didn't like the way they acted when they went down, or maybe are confused about how to deal with it post betrayal. And I think that I went through both of those things. I didn't like the way I acted when it went down. And then I learned how to be a decent human being, because the relationship continued in that relationship.
Well, and circling back to what you said earlier, Elise, about long-term recovery, women in long-term recovery, I love, again, that you've got that honesty in you about hey, I mean, this is not all a bed of roses. In sobriety, in recovery, some things, and I can think of one myself in my own life in recovery, that's this ain't healed yet. I mean, it's not raw and gaping, but there is a wound that I work on a lot, and it just still always comes up when I do like a mini fourth step on it or whatever. And so I love that, you address that too, because it's like, that's the reality of this thing is like, yeah, we get sober, we have access to tools and fellowship and support, but it's not like we're like magicians and magically, woo, everything's fabulous. And so I think these are really important and profound stories and lessons to share. And so I'm excited, personally excited, for you to put that out. And I wanted to just quickly touch on your podcast. I was listening to the episode the other day about BDSM, and I was like, yeah, it was great. But I loved your whole concept. I told Elise this too the other day about, the only one in the room. And I love that you were talking about being at the retreat and how that all led to your podcast title. And I was wondering if you could just share what's going on for your podcast this year too.
Oh, well, thank you for asking. The only one in the room is one of my babies, and it's been, because you're a podcaster, you're both podcasters. It is so much fun, right? It's so much fun to interview people, to get into their stories. I do a lot of prep before I meet my guests, so that we just have a conversation like the one you and I had today, so that we know each other a little bit. And, we're at the point where, around 5.5 million downloads, where we can really, thank you. I don't really solicit guests anymore. I get, I have a submission pile that I have an associate producer who goes through for me. And then I look through them after she's kind of gone through and deleted the ones that aren't a right fit for our show. And I get to curate these amazing shows. We do 10 episodes a season. So I curate a 10 episode season of a variety of different stories. And it's a storytelling podcast. And it's a story about how either one felt like they were the only one in the room, or felt alone in a room full of people, or just had a really cool, unique situation. We had a woman on who is the leader of an all-Black female dive team that dives through the wreckage of slave ships.
Oh, wow. What?
Right? Exactly.
Amazing.
She is the only one in the room who does that. In any given room, you can bet that there are no other leaders of all-Black female dive teams that dive through the wreckage. So she is the only one in the room, but it's a good thing. It's just a really unique situation. So we interview those stories. We have those stories. One of our more recent stories was Amy B. Chesler, whose brother murdered her mother. That was a very difficult story to tell. But so that's also a really unique situation. So we have a really good variety, I think, of stories. You could like scroll through and find something to make you happy, find something that's like in the true crime realm, find something that's, just tells you how to get through something, or that just to connect and have compassion with someone. The goal is, I was the only Black person in a 600-person retreat. And people didn't understand, the people around me didn't understand why that was difficult. They didn't understand. So my hope is that, like, ideally, right, like hypothetically, all 600 of those women would listen to my podcast, not to my story, but find a story like their own. And like, oh, infertility is one of those only one in the room stories. I dealt with infertility. I get it now. This is why it can be a challenge to be that different in a room full of women with babies, and you're the only one who's, been facing this challenge of infertility. That could be a really painful only one. So I'm hoping that people find themselves and then have compassion for others.
I love it so much.
I also want to give a little plug for your writing classes that you're doing. And please do not be surprised if I show up in one day soon. I'm just going to, when I stalk someone, I just go all the way in, Laura. but this, for me, again, this was experienced it the other night when the fact that it was Autofiction. This is the first year I have started writing my book after thinking about it since 2006. And,
Wow.
because back then, back in our day, we sound like an old timer. There was a very, very, very small section at Barnes and Noble. And even as a heterosexual facing white woman, I did not see myself in the aisle, which is really saying something, right? And so I have had a front row seat, especially as someone who lives in media. I ran a magazine. I worked at a TV station. So I've had a front row seat at consuming and watching recovery content come online and recovery happening out loud. And so then there was a tipping point where I was like, well, I missed the boat. All the good memoirs have already been written. And also I don't know if I want to write my memoir. I don't want to hurt people. I don't want to get sued. And so, but then it was like, well, you could just write it and see what happens. Like, you could, instead of just all this craziness in my head, I could just do it. And so this was the year I finally started doing it, thanks to being inspired by my friend Amy here, who's like, just start a lease, post its count. And I'm like, okay. And so then, but I've been really grappling with, is it a memoir or do I want to go addiction fiction? And then the other night when you said auto fiction, I turned is that
Autofiction, yeah.
autofiction? I turned to Amy and I was like, I almost elbowed her right off the chair. I was like, that's it.
Yeah.
So whether or not it's a genre, we can definitely make it one, and so there was just so much relief in that. And because in one part I'm like, I don't know that I want to write another memoir, because there's so many out there by other women who might have similar stories to myself. So how do I share my story in a different way than what's already been done? And it just, in listening to your journey and how all of this unfolded, all it's left me with is I just continue to feel really inspired, right? Just really inspired. And so that is the effect you have on people, whether you know it or not. And so I just wanted to give a little nod to your writing class, because I think it's awesome that you're doing that.
Mm-hmm.
I really appreciate that. And all the things that you just talked about, am I going to hurt people? Where should I start? Like, there are all these questions. Has it already been written? What if, whatever all those what ifs are, I talk about in that class, and we get through them and address them. They all have answers, all those questions, and we find them together in the class. So thank you it's really fun teaching it too. It's at writingpad.com if anyone's interested. So thank you. I'm teaching that and podcasting. I'm teaching memoir and podcasting there. So
then I have to ask, when you're not out creating content, like, what do you just do for a good time, Laura?
Yeah.
I mean, for real, like, there are two things. Like, Scott and I love to go out and eat and go to the movies. We do dinner and a movie a lot. I have my family over every Sunday for dinner and a movie. It's my absolute happy place. But writing is both the thing that I love to do and my profession. So I'm really fortunate that way. When I knock off writing, I just want to snuggle in bed with Scott and watch TV. And we each come with, like, these are the shows I want to watch tonight. These are the shows I want to watch. And then I win.
Of course.
But that's fun for me. It's recreational to me to snuggle with him and watch, like, really good TV. His stuff is different. He's an outdoors guy. He mountain bikes, he surfs, like, he swims. He's outside a lot. I'm almost never outside. I go outside for breaks from writing just so I can get some sun, but then I'm back in. And so we probably wouldn't be together if we hadn't met the way we did. But it's really fun for me to just be in those places in my life right now.
Love it.
That's great.
Okay. And so last question from me, I got to know, I know you're plant-based now, but seeing that we were talking about the frozen hot chocolate, is there one thing that you are just obsessed with, whether it's a beverage or any kind of snack? What's like your thing, your go-to treat?
I'm looking for it. I don't have one up here with me, but I eat this popcorn every day, and it has like a Buddha on the front. And
I love it. The Himalayan one?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yes,
That's
so
very
good.
good.
I
Very
do
good.
the no cheesiness.
Mm-hmm.
I love that popcorn, and it's crunchy and it's salty, but not too salty. And I like crunchy snacks.
Yep.
It's my writing snack. So I usually have a bag or two up in my office with me. And I'll go through about half a bag during a writing session. And so I go through like, I don't know how many a week, but that's my favorite. That's my favorite go-to. I also love Whole Foods vegan brownies.
Ooh,
So I'll have half of one of those almost every night.
love it. Oh my goodness. All right. Well, I mean, we've now connected on so many levels and also on that popcorn, because I do love that popcorn as well. But Laura, I want to thank you so much for coming on. I don't know why, but I almost got verklempt just then. I just really want to tell you how much I appreciate the work that you're doing. And you are a treasure. Thank you so much for sharing your story, and just really look forward to continuing to watch you shine. So I really, really just want to express my gratitude for being on here with us today. And if you're listening, run and get Stash or listen to it on Audible, because Laura's voice, as you can tell, is like butter. It is fabulous on audio, just saying. So go get Stash, My Life in Hiding. And remember to be kind, rewind. Thank you for the honor of your time. Take what you like and leave the rest behind.
Thank you so much for listening to Eternally Amy, a mum of eight's journey from jail to joy. Amy Liz Harrison is a best-selling author, speaker, 12-step coach, meditation teacher, and recovery advocate. To find out more, please visit amylizharrison.com. You can keep up with Amy on all platforms by following @AmyLizHarrison. Please subscribe and review this podcast. It means so much to us if you do.